U.S. President Donald Trump moves quickly on a border wall with Mexico, immigration and trade deals. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C., and this is The Heat. U.S. President Donald Trump has wasted no time taking action on several of his campaign promises. Already in his first week in office, the new U.S. president signed executive orders to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, construct a border wall between the United States and Mexico, and remove undocumented immigrants. We begin our coverage with CGTN's Jessica Stone at the White House. And Jessica, President Trump seems to have already created a diplomatic rift between the United States and Mexico. Tell us about that exchange between the two leaders.
Indeed, it has been diplomacy by tweet on Thursday, and we began the morning with Donald Trump tweeting on his personal Twitter feed that if Mexico wasn't willing to pay for the wall, they should cancel their meeting at the White House next week. And in fact, a few hours later, we saw Enrique Peña Nieto, the Mexican president, doing just that, saying that he had told the White House he would not be coming. Now, this is completely consistent with what he told the Mexican people. It's also important to point out that the White House is characterizing this as a mutual decision, Anand.
Do we know how the Trump administration plans to pay for this wall?
Well, they're now in the practice of floating ideas. In the course of the last few hours, we've heard what sounded initially like a 20% border tax proposal, specifically targeted at paying for the wall in Mexico. And then just moments ago, it was walked back and simply called an idea, not a proposal. But listen to the White House spokesperson talking about how this 20% border tax would, in fact, as they say it, pay for the wall.
I think when you look at the plan that's taking shape now, using comprehensive tax reform as a means to tax imports from countries that we have a trade deficit from, like Mexico, if you tax that 50%, $50 billion at 20% of imports, which is, by the way, a practice that 160 other countries do. Right now, our country's policy is to tax exports and let imports flow freely in, which is ridiculous. But by doing it that way, we can do $10 billion a year and easily pay for the wall.
And 2 points I would make about that. Number one, there are more than 100 countries that have trade deficits with the United States. China, of course, is at the top of the list with the biggest. But also that what this really does is pass the buck to American taxpayers. It will not, in fact, be Mexico paying for the wall under this idea. It would instead be U.S. taxpayers.
Now, Jessica, the British Prime Minister Theresa May will meet with President Trump tomorrow at the White House. What can we expect from that?
Well, we know that they are going to actually both have an Oval Office meeting as well as a press conference in which questions will be taken. We also know that Theresa May, in fact, spoke to the same Republicans that President Trump did earlier today and really emphasized her desire to continue the special relationship, the leadership role of the U.S. and the U.K. in the world when it comes to NATO, also when it comes to trade. President Trump saying earlier today that he expected trade to definitely be on the table, and then he was a little concerned, maybe not so much, that he didn't have a Commerce Secretary. He said he would relish the opportunity to do the negotiations himself. Anand.
Thanks, Jessica. That's CGTN's Jessica Stone reporting. Joining us now from Colorado is Suisheng Zhao. He's the director of the Center for China-U.S. Cooperation with the University of Denver. Here with us in the studio is Afshin Molavi. He is a senior fellow at the Johns Hopkins University's School of Advanced International Studies. From Mexico City, via Skype, we're joined by Vidal Romero. He's a political science professor at the Instituto Tecnologico Autonomo de Mexico. Also with us is Simon Marks. He's the president and chief correspondent of Feature Story News. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Vidal, let me start with Mexico. Events moving very quickly on Thursday. We've had tensions rising between President Trump and the Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, over the construction of this wall. Now the Mexican president has cancelled his visit to the United States. How big a setback is this for relations between these two countries?
I think it is not good news, but the Mexican president basically had no choice but not going to the U.S. Trump was very clear about, if you are not going to pay for the wall, then don't come to the U.S. And that's what the Mexican president did. I mean, the Trump administration is putting Mexican president in a really bad position in terms of having something to bargain with the U.S. because he's moving all things to the wall, which is merely a symbolic thing because there's already a wall or many walls in the border, and the wall is not really going to change things, and it's going to take months and months to be built. So that's not really an issue, but somehow Trump has managed to make this like the first topic to discuss, and it doesn't really make any sense. If you look at the vast amount of topics that we have with them, security, trade, human rights, and the like. So the wall is really insignificant.
Right, Simon, it might be insignificant, but this wall issue has been going on for some time. Let's listen to what President Trump had to say about this. Let's watch.
We're in the middle of a crisis on our southern border. The unprecedented surge of illegal migrants from Central America is harming both Mexico and the United States, and I believe the steps we will take, starting right now, will improve the safety in both of our countries. Going to be very, very good for Mexico.
So he says very, very good for Mexico, but the Mexicans don't think it's going to be very, very good. This is what President Enrique Peña Nieto had to say.
I regret and disapprove of the decision by the United States to continue with the construction of the wall, which has for years, far from uniting us, divided us. Mexico does not believe in walls. I have said time and time again, Mexico will not pay for any wall.
So what are we to make of this? I mean, a president who hasn't even been in office for a week, and he's picked a very, very public fight with an important neighbor.
Picked a very public fight with a neighbor that has been an ally of the United States for years. This is, we are now so far down the rabbit hole, it's almost impossible to see daylight any longer. First of all, he talked there about an unprecedented surge of migrants. If you actually look at the facts, as opposed to what the White House now refers to as alternative facts, but let's look at the actual facts, they show that there was a net outflow of Mexicans leaving the United States last year versus the number of people coming into the country. Secondly, at the stroke of an executive pen, Donald Trump doesn't have the power or the ability to order the construction of a wall. He's going to have to secure congressional approval for it. He's going to have to secure funding for it. Thirdly, if he does slap a 20% tax on Mexican imports into this country, as Jessica noted in her report from the White House, it's going to be American consumers that pay for the wall, not Mexico. I like avocados. I like limes. They come from Mexico. I'll have to pay 20% more for that produce because the Mexican manufacturers will raise their prices by 20%. So I'm going to be paying for the wall. You're going to be paying for the wall, not Enrique Peña Nieto and the Mexican taxpayer. I mean, this is an absurd situation in which he has placed himself, his government, and the United States.
It's not a plan, is it? It seems to be policy being made up just as they go along.
And that's happening day in, day out across an enormously wide array of different areas. We're told tonight they're thinking about lifting the sanctions on Russia. They offer falsehoods on a daily basis at the White House podium. Facts are now replaced by alternative facts. They are extemporizing day in, day out, and they are embarrassing themselves, and they are damaging the United States and its global reputation.
Okay, let me bring in Sam from Denver. Sam, the one way of looking at this, let's say the charitable way of looking at this, is President Trump is merely implementing the promises that he made during the election campaign. Another way of looking at it, of course, is that he has no idea how to conduct diplomacy and is not willing to accept advice from people on how to do this. What do you make of his foreign policy and the style with which he is conducting it, much of it via Twitter, for instance?
It's a very chaotic, as you said. He does not have a clear strategic vision what direction U.S. is going to go. In fact, he's fighting all over the world, in fact, except Russia. In the Chinese case, what Chinese leaders, I think, will be happy to see is that he's fighting Mexico, fighting Canada, and Europeans. So far, the only issue Trump has brought up is the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, which to China's advantage, U.S. is withdrawing. So China has not seen Trump mentioning the trade wall, 45% of tariffs. have not seen him to mentioning the currency manipulation yet. I don't know how much he can move forward on those campaign promises in a relationship with China. What he's doing in this case is creating an opportunity for China to fill in some of Americans' roles in Asia Pacific. The TPP has so far not included China, and China has been thinking of drawing, in this case, TPP without U.S., China could play a role. In fact, today, Australia has already mentioned that they are going to invite China to be part of the TPP negotiation. And China, in that case, as the largest economy in the area, could play a very important, if not leadership, role. And China has its own regional economic cooperation scheme called RCEP. And in that, China has been negotiating with the 10 members of ASEAN countries. So China could expand that to include some countries like Japan. Japan is very concerned about the Trump administration's actions, not only about the TPP, but also security alliance. Trump mentioned that he will maintain the alliance unless he will not maintain alliance unless Japan pays for the cost or share the cost. He even talked about Japan and South Korea should develop their own nuclear weapons. Yeah. So these are very serious problems for Japan and other members of the Asia-Pacific countries to be concerned. Okay. So China, in that case, is really in a good position.
Afshin, what do you make of it? I mean, there were already problems with the TPP even before Trump was elected. But in a sense, has the United States shot itself in the foot here?
You know, with the TPP, I mean, there were problems with it, and I think, in fact, the Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders supporters, there was a rare cheering for Donald Trump from that section. But having said that, I mean, I think what we're seeing, you know, maybe this is the new normal, right? This chaotic foreign policy by tweet. But I think, you know, when you look at what they did with Mexico and this obsession with trade deficits, it totally contradicts and shows a lack of understanding of the way the global economy works today. Even if you look at Mexico and the U.S. car manufacturers, for example, that produce cars in Mexico and export them to the United States, well, they're buying a lot of car parts from the United States. And so it's the way global supply chains work. But I think where he really stepped into it, so to speak, is with this Muslim ban, right? And he basically is conflating people with states, right? And people are different than states, and he doesn't seem to quite get that. And you know, let me just give you one example of Iran, right? So Iran is probably, the Iranian people are probably the most pro-American population, not government, population in all of the Middle East. With one stroke of the pen, he has turned that population against the United States. And so if you're looking for soft power victories, you know, this was not a week of soft power victories.